Today I want to take a look at The Force That Through the Green Fuse Drives the Flower by Dylan Thomas. Dylan Thomas, a very interesting poet from the 20th century. He'd written most of the poems that we remember him for by the age of 20, and his later poem really isn't as interesting as his earlier poetry. It seems that he was sickly as a child and spent a lot of his time in bed at his home in Swansea, where he was read to by his mother. She read the Bible to him a lot, so that's one of his linguistic influences. And he also greatly liked the religious poets of the English language, particularly William Blake, mystical religious poet, and Gerard Manley Hopkins, John Donne. These are the kind of poets that were important for Dylan Thomas, although I don't think he was particularly religious. He just took religious imagery from these poets and used it and redirected it in new ways. And he was certainly unusual for the 20th century, time when poetry was being remade by symbolists and the modernist poets like Ezra Pound and T.S. Eliot. Eliot certainly appreciated Dylan Thomas's poems, and after seeing some of his writings in a magazine, offered to publish some of his poems in the Criterion, the magazine that Eliot was the editor of. Thomas himself had an ambiguous attitude towards Eliot and referred to him on one occasion as Pope Eliot, and it seems that perhaps Eliot lent him some money at some time, and yeah, there was some tension perhaps between them, not because of the money, but just because they were very different kinds of people, different sorts of poets. Thomas was instinctual sort of poet. He just wrote what he felt, while Eliot, although he obviously had the inspirational side, was also a very structured poet and spent a lot of time making sure that everything was just right. So yeah, they were very different. Thomas was more of a throwback to the 18th and 19th centuries, although he wrote mostly in free verse, which is modern, a modern trait. He's most well known for his great imagery. Later in his career, this imagery became rather like clotted cream. There was too much of it, and it didn't always make much sense. But in the early days, these poems that he produced were remarkable and way ahead of the time, or at least way ahead of what you would expect from somebody who was only around 20. When he wrote this poem, The Force That Through the Green Fuse Drives the Flower, he was around 20, and it's as good as anything he ever did, really. In a nutshell, the poem is about how one energy drives life and death, about the cycle of life and death, its inevitability, and how humanity is a part of this cycle, although people might not always understand or appreciate that. So let's begin by reading the poem. The Force That Through the Green Fuse Drives the Flower, Dylan Thomas, 1914 to 1953. The force that through the green fuse drives the flower, drives my green age, that blasts the roots of trees is my destroyer, and I am dumb to tell the crooked rose my mouth is bent by the same wintry fever. The force that drives the water through the rocks drives my red blood, that drives the mouthing streams, turns mine to wax. I am dumb to mouth unto my veins, how at the mountain spring the same mouth sucks. The hand that whirls the water in the pool stirs quicksand, that ropes the blowing wind hauls my shroud sail. And I am dumb to tell the hanging man how of my clay is made the hangman's lime. The lips of time leach to the fountainhead, love drips and gathers, but the fallen blood shall calm her sores. And I am dumb to tell the weather's wind how time has ticked a heaven round the stars. And I am dumb to tell the lover's tomb how at my cheat goes the same crooked worm. Well, it's a short poem. It's made up of 4 stanzas. 4 stanzas with no particular rhyming scheme, and the meter is iambic pentameter most of the time. The lines are often of varying length, and there is always at least one very short line in each stanza. It's written mostly in free verse, and it finishes with a final couplet. It's full of very interesting imagery, even the first line, and Thomas often seemed to take the first line as a title for his poems, is memorable. The force that through the green fuse drives the flower, drives my green age. So the green fuse, what's the green fuse? The green fuse is the stem of the flower, I suppose. So it's like a kind of electricity and energy that passes through the green field and into the roots of the trees and the flowers. It's a force that drives everything, and it's driving the flower, it's driving the poet's life, driving everybody's life, drives my green age. We are like the green plants. As the plants are driven by this energy, so are people. But it also destroys, it blasts the roots of trees, is my destroyer. So the same force that creates, destroys. And I am dumb to tell the crooked rose, my youth is bent by the same wintry fever. The writer finds himself without words to express how the same force or energy that creates the flowers and creates him will also destroy him, or unable to comprehend the meaning behind it. The next stanza continues, same idea. The force that drives the water through the rocks drives my red blood, that drives the mouthing streams, turns mine to wax. So it seems to always be this dichotomy, contrast between the force creating and then destroying. The force that drives the water through the rocks, positive thing, drives my red blood. But then the force also dries the mouthing streams, takes the water away in a drought, and it can also turn the fluids in the body to wax. So it destroys the streams, also destroys the human body. And I am dumb to mouth and to my veins, how at the mountains spring the same mouth sucks. So same idea that the same force that can destroy the mountain spring can also destroy the human body. The hand that whirls the water in the pool stirs the quicksand, that ropes the blowing wind hauls my shroud sail, and I am dumb to tell the hanging man how of my clay is made the hangman's lime. So there's a lot of repetition in the poem, and the phrase "and I am dumb to tell" keeps recurring. The hand that whirls the water in the pool stirs the quicksand. So the hand that moves the water, this is perhaps some of the religious imagery from the Bible coming through, stirs the quicksand, also moves the quicksand, that ropes the blowing wind, controls the blowing wind, hauls my shroud sail, puts up the death sail for the final journey of the poet and everybody else. Hauls my shroud sail, it's a great line actually. That ropes the blowing wind, hauls my shroud sail, and I am dumb to tell the hanging man how of my clay is made the hangman's lime. The hangman's lime, when certain criminals were used to be hanged or hung, they were buried in nameless graves, and lime was used, which was a substance that made the body decompose more quickly. So everything that creates and destroys is connected, he seems to be saying. The lips of time leach to the fountainhead. Love drips and gathers, but the fallen blood shall calm her sores. And I am dumb to tell the weather's wind how time has ticked a heaven round the stars. And I am dumb to tell the lover's tomb how up my sheet goes the same crooked worm. So a lot of repetition in the poem. The images are piled on top of each other, and just more and more examples of how this force or energy that creates also destroys. So the lips of time leach to the fountainhead. Love drips and gathers, but the fallen blood shall calm her sores. It's very kind of romantic and difficult to actually pin down in terms of the exact meaning, but there seems to be some idea of comfort here. The fallen blood shall calm her sores, but basically this second part of the poem, or this later part of the poem, is mostly about the destructive quality of the force that through the green fuse drives the flower. And this is a beautiful image, I think. And I am dumb to tell a weather's wind how time has ticked to heaven round the stars. We suddenly go from the particular to the general, and we go from the human condition and the energy in the world to space and the cosmos itself. I am dumb to tell a weather's wind how time has ticked to heaven round the stars. How can we possibly understand the reasons behind this force and energy that creates and destroys everything? And then again, repeating, and I am dumb. This is one of the most prominent features of the poem, this repetition of and I am dumb. And I am dumb to tell the lover's tomb how at my sheet goes the same crooked worm. So you cannot tell someone who is dead how he is going to die in the same way. It's image piled upon image, and sometimes the images are so kind of overwhelming that they begin to lose their specific meaning. This is sometimes a problem with Thomas. I think that his images begin to lose specific meaning in the poet's love of fine sounding phrases. But here I think it works, but perhaps in the second part of the poem there is a certain immaturity in the way the images kind of are just piled on top of each other with more and more exaggeration, perhaps a little bit more control in the second part of the poem would make it even better, although I would suggest it's already a very, very fine poem with some great, great memorable lines. What are the great images and memorable lines? Well, the first one is that first line, the force that through the green fuse drives the flower, drives my green age. It's a great image. There's something beautiful but also a little bit sinister about it as well. That blasts the roots of trees is my destroyer. Then immediately into that line that is so powerful and effective, and I am dumb to tell. The crooked rose, my youth is bent by the same wintry fever. And after that, really, you could say everything's been said. After that first stanza, the rest of the poem is short, but there's nothing new really in the rest of the poem except the images. What's going to be said has already been said and completed in the first stanza. The rest of the poem is just building up power and force, image on image, to force home the point more and more completely. The force that drives the water through the rocks drives my red blood, that dries the mouthing streams, turns mine to wax. I am dumb to mouth, and to my veins, how at the mountain spring the same mouth sucks. Yeah, so I said before that Thomas knew the Bible well, like a lot of Welsh people, especially Welsh people of his time. So this unto is typical of certain versions of the Bible. I don't like it really. It's a sort of word that probably Ezra Pound would have disliked too. It's an archaism, and there's no real particular reason for it. Why use unto in the 20th century? I am dumb to mouth, unto my veins. Better to use a modern word. I think the rest of the poem is modern in vocabulary, and there's no reason to use one archaic word, I think. Another memorable image, the hand that whirls the water in the pool, stirs the quicksand, that ropes the blowing wind, hauls my shroud sail. I think that could be the most powerful and effective image in the poem. The hand that ropes the blowing wind, hauls my shroud sail. Also think about the long vowels here that make it so, a short line so long, hauls my shroud sail, or I shroud say, really makes it deeper, and the meaning deeper, and really emphasizes the meaning of the image. It's the death that is waiting for everybody. The blowing wind hauls my shroud sail, and I am dumb to tell the hanging man how of my clay is made the hangman's line. I feel this section that loses it the most is what comes next. The lips of time leach to the fountainhead. Love drips and gathers, but the fallen blood shall calm her sores. It's kind of a bit reminiscent of another Dylan Thomas poem, and death shall have no dominion. Dead men naked they shall be one, with the man in the wind and the west moon. When the bones are picked clean and the clean bones gone. I may have got a little bit of that wrong because I'm just reciting it from memory, but this sounds familiar, sounds similar. The lips of time leach to the fountainhead. Love drips and gathers, but the fallen blood shall calm her sores. It kind of begins to lose meaning, and the poet just wants to be romantic in a very exaggerated way. And I think it would be better for a more controlled usage of words at this point. It's a little bit too loose in meaning, a little bit too exaggerated. The fact that a young man is writing the poem is beginning to come out at that point. But then he kind of corrects himself, and with a tour de force, by coming up with probably the best image in the poem. I think I just said that "And Halls by Shroud Sail" is the best image, but I think this is probably the best image. It's a poem that's full of great imagery. And I am dumb to tell a weather's wind how time has ticked a heaven round the stars. Again, it's rather difficult to say exactly what's meant, but it's a beautiful image, and takes us from the world of men right out into the cosmos. Time has ticked a heaven round the stars. Beautiful, memorable image. Then to finish, another repetition, and I am dumb. Thomas did a lot of this, same as "And death shall have no dominion." And I am dumb to tell the lover's tomb how up my sheet goes the same crooked worm. There is certainly a sense of closure there. It's kind of slowing down and becoming more ruminative. So the image itself is a little bit strange, perhaps, because why would somebody living want or need to tell somebody who was dead about the fact that he will die too? However, it's emotion that counts here. It's the building up of image upon image to get a particular effect. And overall, the poem works well, I think, and it's amazing that it was written by such a young man. It shows a great strength of Dylan Thomas, which is his belief in strong imagery and the piling up of image on image to get a particular effect. This is the way his poetry works. It also shows some of the weaker aspects of his poetry, which is maybe sentimentalism and exaggeration and not being always in control of his imagery. But it's a young man's poem, and perhaps a little bit hit and miss. But this particular poem, by skill or by chance, hits the mark more than it misses it. So it's rightly remembered as one of the best poems of the 20th century, and it's a beautiful poem filled with marvelous and memorable imagery.